Can you have a one-sided stick? A one-sided stick, think about it. It's very relevant for this topic. My name is Mark Bernard. I'm a monetary economist. In this video, I want to talk about the confiscated oligarch Russian money and why it has justification to go back to Ukraine, but also how we can get it to Ukraine. It's relevant to the argument of a one-sided stick because usually in economics or in any kind of science, you have empirical or quantitative data to support a hypothesis. And my claim is that it should go back, but however, this is resting on logical prepositions or qualitative data. The logic sometimes is stronger than empirical because if you have empirical knowledge, let's say that you make a claim that all swans are white, and in Europe and America, we observe that all swans are white, but in Australia, and unbeknownst to me or anybody living in Europe or America, there's something called a black swan, then empirically you can be proven wrong. But if you use a logical preposition, such as there's no such thing as a one-sided stick, at least in this time-space continuum, this dimension that we live in, that is not wrong. Your logic is usually spot on, E equals mc squared. If a planet has a specific gravity and you drop an object, it will fall to the ground. That's from Star Trek, actually, Mr. Spock. I don't need to observe that to know, through empirical data, to know that exists because the mass of the Earth is pulling up down on the stick, and the stick is actually pulling the Earth. And the gravity works that way. So that's pretty much proven. And so when I'm talking about international law, moral justification for returning oligarch assets to Ukraine, it rests on some good logical foundations going back from, again, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, Book 2, Chapter 2, Q 66. He said that property also has a common good aspect to it. And he justified this returning of assets when obtained unjustly. Now, the reason we go back to great minds and great thinkers, and it's not just to honor them, they were some people in the past, it was because their logic was thought out so well that it would be hard to refute it once you got into their writings. There's Hugo Grotius, but also John Locke, the foundation of 1776, United States of America, and a lot of the Constitution definition of property rights also, he was an English philosopher during the English Enlightenment. He also justified a lot of English common law. But the definition of property rights is the foundation of capitalism because I own something, I can create capital, or I own this capital, I can transform that capital using my intellectual capital. And through defining what is yours and what is mine is the foundation for every law in the world. Is it not? This is John Locke. And John Locke, in his second treatise, he believed that property is not an ultimate good. It is not an absolute good. This guy wrote ad infinitum about property rights and individual property rights, almost to the extent that there's a post-enlightenment bias on the individual. But he himself, the father of this idea, let's say, said it demands restitution. If property is taken through incorrect means, immoral means, it has to be redistributed to the common good. Imagine a little old lady who is a widow and some gangster takes and robs that lady's house and then uses the money to rob other people's houses. And then the police arrest the guy. That money that was taken from the lady's house, should it not at least be returned to the lady or set up a fund to prevent other criminals to rob houses and extort? Doesn't that make logical sense to you? It shouldn't just be kind of sitting in there waiting and debated upon. Immanuel Kant, 1775, wrote about this in a moral treatise using the silver rule, okay? Categorical imperatives, that property or wealth or money obtained through an incorrect way, an unjust way, or used against other people in an injurious way needs to be stopped, confiscated, and returned. Adam Smith also said the same thing. And it's interesting. Smith said, it is the world and government's right and moral obligation for people who to amass wealth through corruption and inordinate ways, inappropriate ways, inordinately, that Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, money should be returned. There's international law justification, international law, and historical examples. Money from Germany and Japan, World War II, were seized and redistributed. Iraq, Iran, Libya. Many times in the past we have done this, no problem. Then why is this money? People throw different numbers around, but I think in like Brussels, there's $220 billion or 190 million euros sitting in there. Why can't they just return it? Believe me, I think a lot of them want to. A lot of the Europeans want to give it to Ukraine as part of a restitution and rebuilding fund, or at least provide air defense against the poor suffering souls, the civilians who are being attacked relentlessly by the criminals, Russians. Why can't we do this? Well, the reason why is pretty simple. It's a lot of red tape, and there's the, lawyers, and, what did Shakespeare say about the lawyers? He said, first thing I do is hang all the lawyers. Okay. I guess I have some respect for lawyers. It's pretty easy to get into law school. I think anybody out there could get into law school. And I would bet with proper coaching, anybody could pass the bar or some legal exam if they had to. It's pretty easy. I think the Polish prawo jazdy, the Polish driver's license exam is a lot more difficult than that. It's just a matter of going through the ropes. But lawyers have a way of delaying, twisting words, being on the side of the unjust. But there is a way to get that money, those frozen oligarchical money, back to just and proper hands to promote the common good and make the world a better place. Taxes. Taxes are the simplest thing. Taxes are almost above the law in one sense, above the constitutions. They can just write in the tax code something, and you can have a windfall tax on those assets. You can have the taxes on the interest. You can have taxes like a property tax per annum, per year. Okay? You can be just amazingly creative with the tax laws. It's super simple, very hard to challenge legally through this or that. Once it's written and crafted well with a few smart people in a room, you could tax the oligarch money to nothing. That money alone could provide all the money we need in Europe to provide for the common defense and the common good. And the net effect for the whole world would be a tremendous peace dividend, because we would stop the Russians in their tracks. And even if it is not about stopping the Russians, it's the right thing to do. Now, Joseph Stiglitz, he only won the Nobel Prize. He only was the chief economist at the World Banks. He is a strong advocate of this. In fact, he wrote an article the other day in The Guardian, the British newspaper. You can look at it online. And at the beginning of the war, over 300, and I was trying to sign this letter, economists were saying certain things like this to support Ukraine. In fact, they had to stop the petition because it was just growing exponentially, and they couldn't stop it. There is no reason. Don't listen to the rhetoric coming out of Washington. There is no reason we can't say, Russia, go home. We're going to take this oligarch money. We're going to use it for the common good, justified by common law, historical precedents, by philosophers. If you guys, somebody out there, some Russian non-enlightened thinker like Durgan, he's not really a thinker. He's just a rhetorical, I don't know what he is. Definitely not a mystic, because he's not a believer. And I can debate anybody on that. If you can, go against the logical arguments of John Locke and dismantle it, Kant, Aquinas, Adam Smith, then, go for it. But if we are going against these guys, like John Locke and Adam Smith, Kant, Aquinas, we'd have to dismantle our entire civilization. Justification for justice as the greatest good, the common good, the definition of property rights, and the idea that property obtained illegally and unjustly, and in many cases in the past, can be used for the common good to restore those who it was taken from. And you say, well, it wasn't directly taken. Yeah, it was directly taken from the poor suffering souls, not only of Russia, but of Ukraine. And so I give it to Ukraine because They're the ones that have been damaged by this property. Imagine some crazy neighbor comes over and is burning your house, and he does it voluntarily and he's destroying it. He probably should, you know, owe to rebuild it. You can't just destroy something. The oligarchs extracted from the poor suffering souls of this world, and we all pay. So don't believe in these false prophets and these rhetoric coming from Washington. I mean, I almost believe in the prophecy of this is the last pope, and that some person who everybody is hailing as the great, you know, fixer of problems coming along is actually the best. Anyway, don't believe that. Something more concrete. Adam Smith, John Locke, international law, using the tax law to take money that was unjust. I mean, didn't they do that with Al Capone? They couldn't get him this way, they couldn't get it that way, but they got him through taxes, right? So let's Al Capone the Tsar of Russia and take that oligarch money back and give it to the poor suffering souls of Ukraine so we can lead light victory over darkness. And that's what we all want. And that's what's going to happen. Ukraine will win over Russia. My name is Mark Biernat. I'm a monetary economist. Have a great day. Thank you very much.